Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are going to get started with today's lesson. We are going to be learning about the effects the Civil War had, the Reconstruction, and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Now, I want to go ahead and start by doing a little talking circle discussion, and just to get our minds going, to talk about the topic, to see what you know and what you don't know, and just to share our thoughts and our knowledge with our peers. So I want everyone to get their chairs and form a circle here in front of me, and feel free to get your own space, but it has to be a circle. Since it's the first time we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and say the instructions. So the talking circle consists of promoting free and honest dialogue. It encourages anyone to use their voice and practice with working to understand other perspectives. I want you to keep that in mind throughout the whole lesson. It also, if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, this is a safe place for everyone, so go ahead and ask those questions. Say how you feel about a certain topic. We can discuss that here. After I give you the instructions, I will give you guys a couple of questions to think about this. To think about your responses, what you're gonna say, and after I give you a couple of seconds, I will be giving you an object. This object will be given to Joshua, and then once he's done sharing, he will pass it to Sophia, and he will pass it to Janie. So this will be going on around the circle. One important thing to keep in mind is to always speak when the object is in your hands. When the object is not in your hands, you cannot speak. Although you do have to be making connections of the other students' responses, it is important that you do not speak. You have to have the object in your hand. Okay, so the first question will be, what do you think it means to vote? So here you go, Josh, you will be first. And I'm gonna give you guys a couple of seconds to answer. Okay. Thank you everyone for sharing. So since I have the object now, I get to explain what it means to vote. Of course, everybody has their own opinion about it, but I'm going to do the explanation. So voting is a process by which a person or a group of people expresses an opinion. It represents what our country is all about. It helps use our voice and feel like we can make a change and be part of that change. All of our voices have meaning, and once we come together and represent our wants and our needs and our democracy, we can make a huge impact. We get to choose who gets elected to run our country. We vote for the people who are going to represent us in the government, people who make very, very important decisions in our country. That is why it's important that every citizen cast their vote. For example, let's take this talking circle discussion into consideration. Right now, everybody used their voice to explain and speak out what they think voting is or what it means. So you have the option to share. If you don't want to share, you can pass on the object to the other person. And that is the same as voting. You have the option to vote or not. Remember that the right to vote is a privilege and a big responsibility. I want you guys to keep that in mind for my next question. So thank you guys for sharing. That was an awesome explanation. So we're gonna move on to the second question. What are the requirements to vote? Are the requirements different now than back then? So then Josh would be first. Here you go. And I'm just gonna give you guys a couple of seconds to think about your response. Thank you everyone for sharing. Almost all of you guys had the same answer for that one, and it's very known what are the requirements nowadays. So just to clarify, In the United States, anyone who is a US citizen and at least 18 years old on election day can qualify to vote. It may be different in other states. On election day, voters can go to a polling place to cast their ballots. It usually is in a public building such as a school, recreation center, city hall, or a firehouse. Voters present themselves as the poll workers, provide identification, and receive the materials needed to vote. So today, voting has become increasingly computerized. People can vote from the touch of a computer screen, from the comfort of their own home. To answer the second part of the question, when the US government was first formed, only white men over the age of 21 were allowed to vote. After the Civil War, 1861 through 1865, a lot of things changed. Leaders wanted to come up with an idea on how to reconstruct everything. One of the important issues was the right to vote and the rights of Black American men and former Confederate men to vote. The Jim Crow laws were a huge aspect after the Civil War. They were designed to keep Black and white people apart. They were enforced segregation between white people and Black people in public places such as schools, transportation, and restrooms and restaurants. They also made it very difficult for Black people to vote. An example of Jim Crow law is in Alabama. All passenger stations had to have separate waiting rooms and separate ticket windows for the white and colored races. So just imagine that happening here. It would just be very, now, it would be very devastating to still see that happening. And as time passed, amendments were added to the Constitution in order to free the slaves. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 ended the Jim Crow laws. So, does anybody know what the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment consist of? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about your response. It's okay if you don't know or if you don't want to share. Again, you can always pass the object to your partner. You don't have to share, but I would greatly appreciate it. So here you go, Josh. Okay, so some of you guys do know quite something about them. So to clarify, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and the 14th Amendment gave former slaves the rights of U.S. citizens. The 15th Amendment to the Constitution protects the voting rights of all citizens regardless of race or the color of their skin. It also protected the voting rights for former slaves. However, you would think that after all of that, African Americans were able to vote. Unfortunately, that was not the case in many states where they found certain ways around the amendment. They were faced with poll taxes, literacy tests, white primary system, and intimidation. We will go all over this later in the reading, but they were really faced with all those challenges. It is devastating that they had to face all that, even after all of these acts, all of these amendments were passed. But hopefully, it was all changed after the voting right acts. But it was really unfair. How do you feel about this, or what do you think about it? Just giving you a couple of seconds. Here you go, Josh. Thank you. Yes, thank you guys for sharing how you feel about this. I take it into great consideration, your participation. On another note, things changed once the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was put into place. As I mentioned before, it made sure that no citizen was denied the right to vote. This is why it is important to emphasize the right to vote now is a privilege and a responsibility. Although we have noticed in the US, people often tend to vote only in presidential elections than in any other kind of election. This is called low voter turnout. You will be surprised how many people who are qualified to vote do not. And this follows along with my other question. Why do you think that is? So again, a couple of seconds to get you thinking. And here you go, Josh. Thank you so much. I see where you guys are getting. So actually, experts believe that people vote incorrectly. Other studies show that the less educated and the poor are less likely to vote today. Many people may think the voting process can be confusing. They need habit information, opportunity cost, and alternative participation. If you think about it, almost all of them can be resolved by technology, but not at 100%, because a lot of people are not tech savvy. So we still need to help that percentage of people. So my last question for today will be, young people often have low voter turnout during elections, as I mentioned before. In what ways can young people be encouraged to vote? For this question, I want you guys to look at your partner on your left and discuss and come up with different ways you can encourage them. Afterwards, you and your partner will be giving the object to share your response, and you will have 5 minutes to discuss. So I'm going to put my timer, 5 minutes, and you go ahead and discuss. Okay, so the 5 minutes are up. So Joshua, go ahead and get us started. You and your partner. Thank you for sharing, everyone. I love what everyone came up with. Of course, for short-term fixes, we can give young people the specific information they need to register and make it to the polls. This is extremely important because it is advocated, but I don't feel like as much as it should be. So for medium-term goals, we can work on reducing the systematic barriers, especially registration. I know registration can be, sometimes it can be lengthy, sometimes it can be short, but it's just a matter of putting it out there for people to do it easily and accessibly. For long-term goals, we can reimagine civics education. We can teach more people about how to vote. We can normalize it and motivate young voters. We need to be more knowledgeable about it so we can motivate other people and keep this thing going and going, so we can encourage people to use their voices and go out there and vote. We need to combine these goals. If we miss one, then it is not going to work. So keep in mind these important goals. Later on, we can write them down so you can remember and have that, so you can show them to your family members. And together, maybe we can make a change. Thank you, everyone who participated and who are here listening, and just for a wonderful discussion.